Over here with Representative Barry Loudermilk from Georgia, who is in charge of the the new January 6th committee. Is that what you're calling it, January 6th committee?
Yeah, it's the select subcommittee to investigate unanswered questions into January 6th. A typical long government title. But yeah, we just call it the select subcommittee.
And we have so many questions about January 6th that went unanswered for the 4 years of the Biden administration, where a lot of people feel like there was a cover up. Even Democrats that I speak to are starting to come around to realize that maybe it wasn't what they were told. And I know that you're focusing on a lot of things. First and foremost, the pipe bomber, which has been a mystery. They were able to catch these MAGA grandmas, on their farms and identify them, but yet they're unable to identify somebody who allegedly left 2 bombs at the RNC and the DNC. Could you update us on your work so far with the pipe bomber?
Well, you're right. And that's been something even in the previous Congress when I chaired a similar committee. That was one of our focuses. And there's just so many unanswered questions, so many things that do not make sense. And almost to the point of who was in control of the pipe bomb at that moment. We uncovered a lot in the previous Congress. For instance, once the pipe bombs were found, it was almost like a Keystone Cop comedy show. Um, the police failed to put a perimeter around. They were literally letting citizens walk within feet of the supposed pipe bomb. There was no control. It didn't seem anyone was in charge. It was really an embarrassment. And so we did have a hearing about that, which again brought up more questions. Who was in charge? Whose jurisdiction was it? And then the FBI comes in and starts investigating. We all hear, and it sounds like they're within days of identifying someone, and then just everything goes quiet. And then the agents that were working on it were suddenly pulled off, and then many of them were moved over to start prosecuting those who got into the Capitol. And so, to me, the pipe bomb is one of the most significant things that we do need to put resources in to find out who that was, who were they affiliated with, what was their purpose. There's some evidence that the purpose was to draw police resources away from the Capitol to allow the others to get in, that it was a deterrent. We don't know if the bombs were operable or not. We do know from the FBI lab report, which, by the way, we're able to get now. We were never able to get any of that information under the Biden administration. But now the Trump administration, they're working with us because my goal has always been, let's just get to the truth. Right. I want to know what the truth is. I don't want a political story or a predetermined narrative such as the original Select Committee on January 6th gave the American people. And so the Trump administration is working with us to the extent of giving us data,
right.
Even doing some of the research and helping us find the data. So we're getting information that we never had before. We're getting reports of paid human resources the FBI had embedded in the crowds. We're getting the lab report from the pipe bomb. And the lab report shows that there was explosives in there. There was a lot of question. Were there even explosives? And one of the reasons that was a question is because the Secret Service was at the Democrat headquarters, right? Because Vice President-elect Kamala Harris was there. Well, the advance team went to the DNC before she arrived and made several passes with a bomb-sniffing dog that never hit on that device or where that device was supposed to be.
Why would that be, do you think?
Well, originally we thought, well, maybe they were inert. Maybe they were practice, or they were not, they didn't have explosives in them. But now we know they did have explosives. So that opens a new door of questions. Why would the dog not hit on a pipe bomb that video shows was placed the night before? To me, the only answer to that is the pipe bomb was not there when the dog came by. So if the dog came by morning of the 6th.
What time in the morning did the dog come by?
They were, I'd have to go get the exact times, but I think it was maybe around 11 o'clock in the morning. It was before Kamala Harris actually arrived. And I think they probably even slept while she was there.
So this makes sense, right?
Right. So, and that's normal for an advance team of the Secret Service. So if the dogs come by, they don't hit on the park bench where the pipe bomb was seen being placed the night before. Either it was inert, which according to the FBI, it wasn't. It had explosives in it. Or it wasn't there. But we have video of it being placed. So now we need to know Was it placed and picked back up and then put back out again?
Right.
If so, why? Why did they go to that extent? And then we have the pipe bomb was at the RNC, which was seen by someone, a government employee who lives right there, who found it in the afternoon of January 6th and claims it was not there earlier that day. So if, according to the original FBI, both bombs were placed at night after dark on January 5th, and then they were found in the afternoon of January 6th. But now we have a dog that didn't hit. We have a witness that says it wasn't there earlier in the 6th. So now we have to look at, were they placed, picked back up again, and placed again? Why would you do that? Why would you risk getting caught and exposing yourself more? And then the other
and the video you speak of the night before with that video that's sort of famous now of the guy with the hoodie, he was seen actually placing those specific pipe bombs.
Now, he was seen placing the device at the DNC under the bench, because the location where the pipe bomb was placed at the Republican, next to the RNC, which actually behind the Capitol Hill Club, there was no camera right there, but the person was seen coming from the alleyway around
towards that area.
Right.
And were there dog sniffers by the DNC? Or only by the RNC?
It was, the dogs were by the DNC. There was none at the RNC because.
Oh, so they never. So they didn't sniff the DNC, and
no, they sniffed the DNC, not the RNC.
Okay.
Yeah. So the RNC, the bomb was just found by a person who saw the device,
right?
But who also says it wasn't there earlier in the day. So this is now other questions. Is we have to go down this path of, then why would you place something? We have a video. Security video of the 5th it being placed. Why would then you go back, pick it up, and then put it back out again? One of the problems we have is none of the video from January 6th exists anymore.
And how come?
Well, from what we've learned is when the FBI showed up in the afternoon or evening of January 6th to start their investigation, they went and requested from the RNC their security camera footage for the evening of the 5th and the 6th. The morning,
right?
Went to the DNC and requested the same thing, and they encountered a couple of other detectives who had started investigating and said, "We have identified the person. It's this person in the hoodie. You need to just look at the January 5th video." So no one obtained any of the video from the 6th, and apparently all the videos have been overwritten.
Wow, that's interesting, and that's frustrating because from what you're saying, there was an egg timer on the pipe bomb, and the egg timer, when it was found, had 20 more minutes before it was supposed to explode. And the egg timer, the maximum is 60 minutes. So somebody had to set that timer or put that bomb there 40 minutes before it was found.
Right. So let's go from the theory that they were put out the night before, because we do have video of this person at the RNC and DNC and them placing the device under the bench on the 5th. With having egg timers, if you place them there, you would have to come back and at least 40 minutes before the one was found at the RNC and set the egg timers.
Right.
Why would you then place them the night before if you had to go back? And the more you're out around this area, the more you risk getting caught, right? None of this makes logical sense. And so this is the challenge to us. It opens more avenues for questions, but at least gives us a lead in to try to figure out what was going on here. Was there just this one person? Was it multiple people? I mean, there's a theory out there, could it have been different organizations? We don't know at this point, but what we do know is the story that we were fed all this time doesn't hold a lot of water.
Doesn't make sense. And you mentioned that the pipe bomb by the RNC was in plain sight for the most part. If somebody passed by,
it was behind the building next to some garbage cans. So it wasn't hidden, but it was obscured. So the person lived right there and they happened to see it. The one at the DNC was under a park bench, and in my opinion, it was put to be seen.
So that's what I'm trying to get to. Were these bombs planted to be seen or to actually go off is the question.
That is a good question. From what we're gathering from the FBI report, they weren't going to go off. Now, at least the
Now, if it
analysis
did
of the
go off,
RNC, the DNC one was destroyed by the robot, right? So
destroyed by the robot.
yeah, so the bomb robot that I guess Metropolitan Police brought
Right.
out, or the Secret Service, I can't remember who brought the bomb squad out, but their robot destroyed the device.
And did that one have 20 minutes to go too? Or
we don't know
so the RNC one,
because the egg timer's in pieces. So.
If she didn't find it, the woman didn't find the RNC pipe bomb, and it did go off, how much damage would it have caused?
Well, it's hard to determine because the location of where it was right next to a concrete wall.
Right.
Right. So I don't know it would have done, and I'm not a bomb expert, but we also don't know how much explosives were in the device.
Right.
Right. So there would be places you could put them to do more damage than where they were. So it's a lot of this is speculation on our part, but it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
You know, from a logical standpoint, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's what makes it more complicated.
Right. And you mentioned last thing about the pipe bomb is that the Biden administration, the FBI was not cooperative, but they were very cooperative when it came to prosecuting other people. And it would seem like the real terrorists, and, you know, Joe Biden used the word domestic terrorist a lot to refer to people at January 6th, but the real quote unquote domestic terrorist would be the person who planted these pipe bombs. But the FBI didn't want to share this information with the committee, which is interesting, in my opinion.
Right. And there's so much of the Pelosi's committee.
Right.
I mean, it's clear to me from the investigative work we've done before, and to anybody who followed the facts as we presented them, that the Select Committee on January 6th, Pelosi's committee, was there for one reason, was to pin everything that happened on the shoulders of Donald Trump.
Right.
But the facts do not bear that. And that's the controversy about the missing documents was made a lot of news when we started finding out a lot of the work that they did not preserve.
Right.
Right. Pelosi's committee interviewed a lot of people that we did not have their testimonies.
So what happened to, there's been a lot of rumors, but what ultimately happened to a lot of that work that they did?
So we recovered some of it, right? We were able to find out that some of the depositions were sent to the White House.
Right.
Well, these are House documents, right?
Right.
We were able to obtain those, and they were depositions of White House employees. And as I started reading it, I'm like, well, I can see why they didn't want to keep these, because these depositions, they don't support the narrative that we were told.
Right.
And that ended up being a pattern. The Secret Service agents that were finally called in to testify long after Mrs. Hutchinson stood up and blamed the president for trying to attack a Secret Service agent and take control of the limo to come to the Capitol. None of that made sense to me to start with, but we were able to find the Secret Service depositions at the Department of Homeland Security, and we fought DHS to be able to get those. And when we found those, all of them totally dispelled all of that story.
Right.
So I started seeing a pattern is the documents that the Select Committee didn't keep were those that didn't support the predetermined narrative, and it was significant. But there's still some that we haven't recovered, and the most significant is the Select Committee on January 6th videotaped every transcribed interview and every deposition. They videotaped it. None of those videotapes exist except for some small snippets that they used in their TV production hearings.
Is that unusual?
I think it's extremely unusual. When you interview over 1,000 people and you videotape every interview, it's extremely important to have those videos.
Of course.
I'll give you an example. As one of the members of my previous committee told me as an attorney, he said, when you're having a deposition with someone and all you have is a written transcript and you hear the question is, did you shoot the clerk?
My cousin Vinny.
Right. And the answer is, I shot the clerk.
Right.
But you don't hear him say, I shot the clerk.
Right.
You know, how ridiculous is that?
Of course.
Right. There's a huge difference there.
Of course.
And so that's what we wanted to see. And especially when it came to certain depositions, because one of the attorneys who was representing one of those witnesses, Mrs. Hutchinson specifically, the Select Committee nearly ruined his life because they accused him of convincing her to lie under oath, because it's clear either because her first three testimonies to or transcribed interviews to the committee were opposite of what she ended up saying that made national news, right? And they paraded her in front of the entire world to make these accusations against Donald Trump. Her 3 testimonies before that were opposite of that. So either she lied in the beginning or she lied afterwards. Well, the select committee accused her attorney, Stefan Passantino, of telling her to lie. The only reason I knew that these videos existed
To tell her to lie the first time, and that's how they
tell her to keep with her story. Basically, he was telling her, they accused him of telling her to lie, continue lying under oath, right?
So
to stick with her first stories.
He told her to stick with her first story.
That's what they were trying to say, but he never did.
Right.
Right. And so the way I found out that these videotapes existed, he called me early on in the last investigation. He said, can I just come and look at those videotapes? Because that will exonerate everything they're saying about me. And that's when we found out not only did that tape not exist, but none of the tapes existed. Now, Stefan has been totally exonerated by both the Georgia bar and the DC bar, but it took a lot.
I'm sure.
And this was the level the select committee would go to, even willing to destroy the character and the livelihood of somebody to continue their narrative.
One quick thing I wanted to tell you about the interviews. A lot of people that were a lot of the J6ers that either pled guilty or might have been found guilty right after that happened, before they were sentenced, they received a letter from the select committee to testify. Pretty much like hint, hint, if you say what we want, maybe we'll encourage, maybe you'll get a lighter sentence. It was sort of that hint, hint. And I have a lot of those letters that they received, which I thought was completely just crazy that you would get a letter like that before sentencing to come testify for the J6 committee. So I would have loved to see some of those testimonies, because one of them actually was the co-defendant of Matthew Perna, who committed suicide because he got a terrorism enhancement.
Yeah.
And then his co-defendant wound up not going to jail and on the select committee. So all of these interviews, like you're saying, are so important. So yes, it's unfortunate that they've been destroyed. One more thing I wanted our audience to know about the pipe bomb as well is that you mentioned AT&T and the phone servers that were all the like Verizon and whatnot that were asked for data correct on the pipe bomber, and the only one that didn't turn it over was AT&T. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So yeah, that's an area of confusion we had during the previous conversation or the previous committee, is because there was supposedly a select amount of data that was corrupted and never turned over to the FBI. But then I found some information from AT&T saying that it never was corrupted, that they did give it to the FBI. So it was very confusing. What we found out now is the FBI did their due diligence. They sent a preservation letter to all the carriers, basically saying, do not delete your data. It's going to take us a little while to go to the lawyers and get the subpoenas that we need to, go through the legal loopholes to give you, or, compel you to give us this information. So they send them a letter of preservation. Don't destroy the data. We'll get you the subpoena and you can provide us this information. So all the carriers received that. And the story we're getting right now from AT&T, it was a subset of that data that was supposedly help isolate who was in the area of the pipe bombs at those given times, January 5th and January 6th. So AT&T went to download the data a few hours before it was supposed to be deleted to preserve it, but because it was so much data and such a short time, it corrupted the data and corrupted the server, and the data was gone forever. Now, I spent 20 years in the IT business. That didn't pass the smell test to me, because you do backups upon backups of data. So it was very confusing because there were two different stories going on. We found out now, yes, the data was corrupted. So when the FBI received the data from AT&T, it was corrupted. But there didn't seem to be an effort to go back and get uncorrupted data. And so now the FBI is saying, basically, we can't identify the pipe bomber because we're pretty certain that the identity is in the cell phone data there, but now that data doesn't exist. And so we're looking into more broadly what happened to the data. Does it exist, and can we get it?
And what was interesting, and I thought, is that the woman who found the pipe bomb actually worked for that data company in the past. That's interesting. I'm sorry that when I heard that, I was shocked. I mean, that's a bit of a coincidence. I'm going to personally look into it myself. So we're going to talk about the pipe bomb more at the J6 hearing, hopefully in the future when the government reopens, and other things. You're focusing on the confidential human sources
Right.
element of it, as well as the security that day, how it failed.
Right.
Anything else?
Well, those are our top priorities right now, because if you go back and you look at the Select Committee on January 6th, and this is Pelosi's committee I'm talking about, the legislation that was passed in the House to set up the committee, their number one task was to investigate the security failure at the Capitol and find out, regardless of who it was, how did these people get into the United States Capitol, right? That should have never happened. Where was the security failure? If you go and pull the Select Committee on January 6th, their final report, this huge volume of information, there's relatively nothing in it about security failures at the Capitol. And that was their number one task. I'll give you an illustration. The word pipe bomb is only used about 5 times in the entire report, and it's just referring to the fact that there were pipe bombs. But the name Donald Trump is listed over 1,000 times.
Wow.
Okay.
Crazy.
This was a political document. They had a predetermined narrative that this was going to be Donald Trump's fault. And so they didn't let facts or evidence get in the way. And so, we have a responsibility to determine where was the security failure, because if we don't fix the failure, it's bound to happen again at some point, right? And too many people have unfairly shouldered the blame for this. One of those is the chief of police that day, Stephen Sund,
right,
who was suddenly fired. It was, I still can't wrap my head around why Pelosi fired him the next morning when he would be the one to actually do an after action investigation to help determine where was the failure. And then you have instances, for instance, there was an all hands on deck order given by the chief of police to have everyone who wasn't being quarantined because of COVID to be here at the Capitol that day, because they knew it was going to be a big event. There were a lot of people coming into town. I mean, most everybody knew there was a reasonable threat of violence simply because we had violence all over the country in 2020, right?
It was sort of the norm.
It was all over the place. Some thought it was maybe Antifa. There was the Election Integrity Project out there that was threatening to riot at every state capitol and the U.S. Capitol. And so there was an all hands on deck order. But over 70% of the intelligence division stayed at home, right? And the chief wasn't even aware of that. There's just so many different nuances that maybe there's something conspiratorial there. Maybe it was just people weren't doing their job. Maybe there was other circumstances. But the point is, that select committee never investigated this. And if they did, they had an entire team dedicated to investigating the security failures. But none of their work was preserved, nor is it in the select committee's report.
Did they ever look into who was giving orders that day in terms of munitions, because I think a lot of the security failures came when the cops themselves were gassed by their own gas, because it obviously it broke the police line. When the cops started shooting pepper balls and munitions, and then it just caused a lot of chaos.
And the short answer to that is no.
Right.
Not that we know of. We don't have any evidence that the select committee did that. And if you look at the Capitol Police after action report, it's a very thin document.
Right.
And this was with acting police chief Yogananda Pittman, who was immediately elevated to chief right after that Chief Sund was fired. And it's the thinnest little document. So I was on the baseball field during the domestic terrorist attack, where the guy came on the field and started shooting at us, right? The after action report by the Capitol Police was this huge document. There were about 15 members of Congress. They were involved in this. And the after action report was very thorough. It was a detailed document. It was many times larger than the January 6th after action report, where every member of Congress virtually was here affected, right? And so no one has really looked into that until our committee in the previous Congress and the committee right now. That's why we're putting so much effort into the pipe bomb, into the intelligence, these confidential human sources, which we've read over a lot of the documents. The evidence is there. The intelligence was there. It was clear there was going to be violence at the Capitol that day. Even it was expected to be worse than it was. So Was that information passed on to the Capitol Police? Was it not? Were there multiple reports coming out of the FBI we don't know of? Those are things we're looking at. Department of Department of Homeland Security. Did they have intelligence? My previous investigation revealed that they did, but we were never able to get those reports from the Department of Homeland Security. We're working to get those now.
Great.
So this is so important, and it's not just for the members of Congress. It's important to the public. It's important to the press, who are all here in this Capitol, and we need to know that it's safe and secure. And I don't think the confidence is there with the people that it is.
And how about Antifa being in the crowd that day? I know that I was marching and I covered almost every Stop the Steal rally, and every single time we walked down the streets, that throwing things at us, shouting. And that was the first time I looked around and was like, where are the counter protesters? It was really strange. I knew something was missing. And then I started to realize that they were sort of dressed as Trump supporters as we neared the Capitol, because I identified two of them. Is that something you guys are looking into?
It is.
Agitators that might have been Antifa types?
Right. And we're casting a broad net on this, because the way I like to conduct an investigation is if there's a theory and you want to go and prove that theory true, you will every time, because you'll dismiss any evidence that's contrary to your opinion. But if you attempt to prove a theory false and you can't, then more than likely you found the truth. So we're looking at this broad perspective. And if you look at the number of people here that were here that day, it almost makes sense that there were multiple groups there, right? And so we are looking into potential intelligence, and that it was Antifa there. What were they doing there? Did they instigate? Were there other organizations there? Because look, you can't ignore the fact that there were multiple riots already all around the United States happening that year, and some people had gotten pretty good at creating chaos. And so we have to include that in what we're looking at, is who was in the crowd.
Right. And I wanted to hit on Roseanne Boyland because it's a story important to me. She was killed that day. Do you think we'll ever get some answers pertaining to that, Roseanne Boyland? I know that's not necessarily right now what you guys are focusing on. Do you foresee maybe the FBI looking into this? Because she was seen being beaten by a police officer before she died. People have testified she was alive. She was hit with a pepper ball and with gases. And actually 4 people died that day. Is that something that you think we'll get answers on?
Well, it's something I think that we are going to be looking into, because the way I look at this is the safety and security of the Capitol is not just the building itself, but Capitol grounds. And if you talk to your frontline police officers here, part of their responsibility is protecting those that are here. Now, I'm not a violence denier. Yeah, there was violence, terrible violence at the Capitol that day. And some of the other things that we've been looking into is looking at body camera footage from Metropolitan Police. And I think by obtaining more of that footage, we can get different angles that you don't get from security cameras. Security cameras do not have sound. And this is something that a lot of people didn't realize. None of the Capitol Police security cameras have microphones. There's no sound. But they'll say, but we watched the January 6th Select Committee, Pelosi's committee, televised hearings, and you can hear the sound. That sound was dubbed in by sound effects specialists.
Really?
Oh, yes, definitely. There's no sound.
No,
so you hear all these crowds.
That's right.
That is not part of the security camera footage.
That's completely outrageous.
Oh, it is. And so there's a lot of nuances that are hard to explain. I mean, some we've been able to explain why doors were just open and people were able to come in. Well, once the Capitol was breached, a lot of the people that came in knew where they were going, and they went and opened these fire escape doors, which you can't relock, right? Once they're open, they're open. So that makes sense. But who was it that opened the doors? We need to look into that. But a lot of things that happened in and around the Capitol, I think, by obtaining body cam footage, like now, Capitol Police, they don't have body cameras, but Metropolitan Police does. We were doing that in the previous committee, and we uncovered undeniable evidence that there were plainclothes Metropolitan Police officers embedded in the crowds wearing GoPro, and at least one of them was encouraging people to go into the Capitol.
Right. I've seen that footage.
But you also have to keep in mind, of all these people out there, there's individuals. You may have FBI or Metropolitan Police that are anti-Trump on their own, or some that are pro-Trump, but all of them should be acting in the professional capacity as a police officer, not a political activist at that time.
Right.
So, yeah, a lot more questions still than answers, but I believe we're going to find as much evidence and fact as we can and report it to the American
Right.
people.
And Arctic frost. You were not a subject being spied on, were you, of Arctic
Well,
frost? But
with new evidence coming out, it appears that I may have been.
really?
So, yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, if you remember, I was falsely accused of giving reconnaissance tours
Right.
in the Capitol.
Yes.
So you talk about the letters to come testify to the select committee. They sent me one, but they sent it through CNN. Instead of sending it to me, they send it to CNN. So the world finds out before I do that I'm being accused of being a traitor to the country. And a lot of people don't understand the security risk that poses.
Right.
Me and my family got over 200 death threats in the 2 weeks after that. I mean, credible death threats. Right. Because someone on that committee wanted to make a political point. What we're finding out now is that Arctic frost may have been much broader than just Trump and Russiagate. That many supporters of Trump or those that they could tie to Trump to make a good story were part of their targets as well.
Right.
And I have been told I was on a TSA list too. So.
Right. What they did, they basically sort of looked at phone records, and it was sort of like a big general warrant. I don't know if that's the right way to explain it, but is what they did normal protocol for this type of operation?
No, and some recent reporting is that the committee may have obtained a huge amount of personal phone records from individual citizens. That would be very questionable. It depends on what the information was and how they obtained it. But
is that report available yet to the public?
Well, we don't know. It's just information that some investigative reporters have come out with.
Right.
And so that we need to look into that as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm just still amazed at the extent that committee went without regard for the safety, the character, the livelihood of the people they attacked, that they created victims. The lack of regard for humanity just to prove their political point or to make a political point on a false narrative.
It was really to punish President Trump for questioning the election. And that's what January 6th was, I think, and all of the weaponization there, which just kind of leads you back to the, I guess, common sense conclusion is that maybe they were hiding something. I don't know. I mean, why the big operation, Arctic frost, the January 6th committee and all these things? It was all about President Trump saying the election needed an investigation.
Yeah.
And ultimately, and I just want to hit home with the fact that what was stopped that day was objections to the certification, not the certification.
Right.
When those people came in. So people forget that. But moving on to the shutdown, the big government shutdown, it's exciting times, I guess, here in Washington, D.C. When the government is shut down, it has to be different. What are your thoughts? When can we expect the government to reopen? I'm looking forward to it reopening just because I would love for you guys to be able to do more work with the January 6th hearings. So when can we expect that?
Well, that's a good question. You probably need to go from here over to Jeffrey's office or Schumer's office and ask them when are they going to reopen the government. This is a unique situation. I mean, I've been here for 11 years. We've been through a few shutdowns, but I don't recall that we've been through a shutdown when it's the argument over just extending the funding that already existed, which was Biden's funding. I mean, we're extending the Biden administration's budget because we still haven't completed our first budget under the Trump administration here, or the first appropriations. And it's the Democrats that are shutting down on it. And they're claiming that it's about this health care policy, but the funding of the government is separate from policy. This is not, and we've heard this time and time again from the Democrats, the appropriations is not where you pass policy.
Right.
That needs to be negotiated. I think it's beyond just the healthcare issue. I mean, if you look at, and this is my personal opinion, there's a couple of things I think people are missing. One, they're very upset over Trump eliminating funding streams, especially from USAID.
Right.
Right. So I think there's a lot of investigation of where that money needs to go. But if you go and you look at the bill they're trying to pass, it restores that funding. But the other thing is they have effectively shut down the Trump policy, the Trump agenda in Congress right now. We're not getting anything done. And so I think that's something else. Unfortunately, they're holding the American people hostage at this point. I mean, in about 4 days from now, there are people that are going to be not getting a paycheck. Food stamp benefits are coming to a halt. I mean, President Trump has done a superb job in navigating through this shutdown, because what the Democrats like to do is that they'd like for the American people to feel pain, right? Because in American people get upset, they call their congressman and say, I don't care what you do, reopen the government. And so he's done a phenomenal job of navigating through that, because he found a way of paying the military. He found a way of funding WIC. And so it took that leverage away from the Democrats. And I think that's why they are continuing on with the shutdown, because they want the people to feel pain. If you go back to Obama, and during his shutdown, he made it as painful as possible on the American people. I mean, I remember he shut down monuments in Washington, D.C. The World War II memorial was closed. It's marble monuments sitting out in the open. How do you close something that it took more manpower to put the barricades up and to secure it, to keep people from going into the monument, than it would if you just left it open? Trump has taken the opposite approach. He's left the parks open, right? And I've seen probably the greatest story that I heard is the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, right? It's the largest national park in the country. When the park was going to curtail some of their visitor center needed to close, and they weren't going to do some of their programs, the local governments, city and county, pitched in and funded the national park to stay open for the people. I thought that was tremendous.
That is.
Right. And so Trump has actually tried to make it less noticeable that there is even a shutdown. Now, when we pass November 1st and air traffic controllers don't show up to work,
yikes.
TSA doesn't show up, a lot of critical services can't be done because the workers aren't being paid and they're just going to stay at home. That's when you're going to start feeling the pain.
And the food stamps. Do you think people might buy it or start stealing? There was a lot of social media videos where people were saying they're just going to go into stores, fill up their carts, and walk out.
Well, I would encourage them not to. There is a lot of good churches out there. There are a lot of social organizations that can provide food for these people, right? America is the most generous country in the history of the world. We're not going to let people starve. But please don't use this as an excuse to break the law or riot.
Yeah. Last question. Our reporter, Allison Steinberg, cornered Nancy Pelosi in a very viral video, which, she lost her mind. I was shocked by her reaction to that. What do you think about Miss Pelosi, former Speaker Pelosi's reaction? Do you know her well? Is that standard for her to react that way to a question?
That is so out of character from her. She's always calm and cool, collected. But you're right. Her reaction to that was vicious. That tells me that's where we need to be looking. But the fact is, we've delved into that so deeply, and we have totally dispelled this entire myth that Donald Trump did not call out the National Guard. She knows that's not true. In the previous investigation I ran, one of the things we uncovered is that on January the 3rd, and that's 3 days before January 6th, Donald Trump ordered the National Guard to be ready to be deployed on January 6th. General Milley annotated that in his log. General Milley testified to that to the DODIG, that the president ordered the National Guard to be ready to be deployed. The president can't send the National Guard because of the separation of powers in the Constitution. They have to be requested. So the president basically delegated the authority to, upon request, deploy the National Guard. He delegated that to the Department of Defense. And Chief Sund, starting around January 4th, realizing that there was going to be a huge crowd, had already sent requests to the Capitol Police Board, which pretty much reports to the Minority Leader of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, who was Nancy Pelosi. They have to approve whether the National Guard comes or not. He made multiple requests starting on January 4th, all the way up in during the day of January 6th, and all of those requests were denied until shots were fired in the Capitol.
Right.
That's when they decided they needed the National Guard. Then on top of that, it took the Department of Defense over 3 hours to actually deploy the National Guard, who was sitting in the Army, starting at their armory at 6 o'clock in the morning, ready to be deployed because Donald Trump already told them to be ready. So I believe she knows it's not true. And she's just avoiding dealing with something that she knows. That, I mean, she admitted herself on camera that it was her fault. Right.
Well, the good news that came out today was that the Autopen pardons are now being investigated. Okay. So your colleagues in the, what a lot of people call the Unselect Committee, the J6 one, might not have pardons. And it's bizarre that Joe Biden pardoned them. And now they're saying that they were not valid. I think that law enforcement is looking into this. So any final comments on that?
Well, it's interesting that those pardons were issued when they were issued, and to whom they were issued, and who did not get a pardon. And so I would be looking, be very interesting to see what comes out of that.
Right. It would be interesting, especially for certain individuals. And your book, And Then They Prayed. When did this come out? Is this available on Amazon?
It is. We published that on July the 4th this year.
Oh, wow.
I actually originally published a previous version of the book about 11 years ago, but going into the 250th anniversary of our country, I felt it was important to publish it again. So we revised it, we updated, added some chapters. And this is 14 stories from American history, well researched. I spent over 10 years doing the research on it, of acts of divine providence that occurred through the history of our country, running from 1746 all the way into the 20th century. We got World War II, Civil War, even the Apollo space missions, Revolutionary War. And so many people are aware of, like Benjamin Franklin at the Constitutional Convention, standing up and acknowledging, as if it was common knowledge, all of the acts of divine providence and as a result of prayer that happened during the Revolution. General George Washington has acted as president. President George Washington, his first act was to declare a national day of thanksgiving and prayer because of the multiple acts of providence that were known to have happened in our favor during the war. And there's been plenty of books written about that, but God's providence didn't stop then. It continued on throughout our history. And so, And Then They Prayed is really...
What does that mean, And Then They Prayed?
So people ask me about that. It's an interesting title. It's like it's the continuation of a thought, and it is. And that comes, the inspiration comes from the great Christian evangelist, General George C. Patton, which people don't think about being a really strong man of prayer, but he really was. Right near the end of World War II, Patton had moved into France, and he was in France and wanted to already be in Germany, but there were storms that have come in. It was immoderate rains that had caused them to pause. They couldn't advance. A few hundred miles away in the Ardennes forest, the U.S. 6th Infantry Division and several British divisions had pushed the Germans back into Germany, and they were held up on the Siegfried Line. And it was blizzard conditions. A few weeks later, the Germans broke through in what's known as the Battle of the Bulge, was decimating our troops. Right. What people don't realize is 2 weeks earlier, before the Battle of the Bulge, not knowing it was happening, General Patton called his chief chaplain into his office, frustrated by these rains, that he couldn't go in and right. personally take Hitler himself. He called his chaplain in. He says, "Chaplain, do we have an official Army prayer for good weather for battle?" And he said, no, sir, we don't. He said, "Why don't you go write one?" So the chaplain went and wrote a prayer for good weather for battle. And on the other side, he put a Christmas message. So General Patton ordered 250,000 prayer cards to be issued to every soldier that they be praying. This is 2 weeks before the Battle of the Bulge. As he's talking to his chaplain about this, and we have the complete story in here, General Patton goes into this sermon to his chaplain about how powerful prayer is. And in that, he talks about how when they landed at Normandy and we've made our way all the way through without having to retreat, that was due to the prayers of the people back at home in America praying for us. He said, that's not enough anymore. He said, we need to be praying for ourselves now. And he said, there's three things that it takes to win victory: planning and working. Or two. He said, planning is when we sit down and we strategize our battle plans, right? Working is the training and preparing that we do. The third thing is what really determines victory or defeat. And he said, that is prayer. He said, that is the determining factor. He said, some people call it luck. I call it God. It's like plugging into a great power circuit.
Right.
So then he basically what Patton was saying, and throughout our history, you see this, we plan, our national heroes have planned, they worked, and then they prayed. And so that's the title. And what's so important right now, we have to go back and we look, what has sustained us for 250 years as a nation, right? People ask, can we continue on for another 250 years? My answer to that is yes. If you look back and see what sustained us for the first 250 years, we have to repeat that.
And you say that's prayer.
It is.
So this is available on Amazon, and President Trump received a copy, the first copy you said?
The first pre-release copy I took to his office and I inscribed into it. I put to my favorite president, which is what he says every time he calls. He's like, Barry, this is your favorite president. And then I put, I wrote to someone who has also experienced divine providence. And when I said that,
that would be a chapter, I think, in here, because everything that happened, I think,
right.
The redemption arc of Trump, President Trump, and so many people in this country has been incredible.
And he's told me it's a great book. And so
he read it.
It's actually hit the #1 bestseller in 3 different categories on Amazon.
Oh, wow.
But it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Hudson Books in the airports, every major retailer. I know some are starting to stock it in the bookshelves or on the bookshelves in their retail stores. And within the next couple of weeks, we'll be having a deluxe hard copy for Christmas that's coming out.
It's called And Then They Prayed.
And Then They
Check
Prayed.
this out on Amazon. Any less fun fact about Congress? I always ask people that, like something fun that the audience wouldn't know about Congress, or something here that's unusual that maybe people wouldn't know about.
Well, there's just so many things that people don't know. But I guess one of the stories that I have that I didn't realize was many years ago, I was actually rushed to the hospital here in a medical emergency. And as I was about to be taken, the house physician asked what was my pseudonym. And I'm like, what do you mean? They said, what name do you want to go by at the hospital? I said, why? They said, because there are prying eyes that monitor the hospitals around here. So I had to come up with a name.
Right.
And so, well, I'm at the hospital and I'm in the emergency room. I'm just laying there with my eyes closed and I hear someone calling this name and I'm not responding. Right. And then it dawned on me, oh, that's me.
Right.
And so I went by this name the whole time I was in the hospital. And the problem is they wrote all my prescriptions in that name.
Right.
So I had to go back and get all that corrected. But that's just one of the nuances that you don't think of that's, pretty much security rated.
So that's interesting. So that was a fun fact from Congress. And thank you so much, Representative Loudermilk, for taking the time to talk to us today. We're praying for you and your great work with the J6 committee. A lot of Americans are still interested, especially our audience. A lot of Trump supporters still want to know what happened that day. So thank you for your hard work, and we're looking forward to hearing all about it.
Yeah.